Hi there. Welcome to Prices at the Pumps, our weekly Wednesday look at all things energy market related. I'm Scott Squires, pleased to be joined by Dan McTeague, SaltWire energy expert. Dan, want to talk about a couple of things this week like we do every week, but let's start off with what most consumers want to know in the next day or two. What are they going to expect when they go to fill up their vehicles with diesel, gas, whatever? What's happening in the region?
It looks like you're looking at still a bit of a decrease in prices. You didn't see it you saw a massive decrease in Newfoundland on Saturday, but for the rest of the Atlantic provinces, you didn't quite see that decrease. And so you're likely to get another 3 cents, potentially another 3-cent decrease. But Newfoundland, of course, can expect what amounts to an increase of about 2 to 4 cents a liter, maybe even a little higher. But again, the PUB has its own numbers. Diesel looks good news. It's down about 4 cents a liter. And of course, if you're looking at home heating fuel and the likes, a little closer to 5 cents a liter. So a bit of a mixed bag, with gasoline down for Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, PEI, but up for Newfoundland. And as far as diesel, everybody's looking at about a 3.5 to 4 cent decrease. And that looks like the state of affairs right across the world right now, with the market still very much in turmoil.
Each week when we talk, going back over the weeks and months that we do this weekly segment, we've seen the roller coaster of gasoline, in particular, the up and the down. But what really caught my eye driving by the pumps in the last couple of days is the price of diesel, which is now, in Nova Scotia anyway, down around the 133 range, give or take. And that's a good chunk less than a price of a liter of gasoline. And it's not that long ago that diesel was probably 20 or 30 cents more than a liter of gasoline. So while we've seen gas do this, we've seen diesel do this. What's going on, Dan?
Well, Scott, diesel is the global workhorse. It is the fuel that gets very little respect, but should. In November, mid-November, around Remembrance Day, we saw diesel on U.S. markets hit $4.80 a gallon. They're now down about $2.20. So you've seen a really remarkable decrease in its price. Much of it to do with combinations like a slightly warmer winter than expected, especially in areas like Europe, which desperately needed more diesel and was able to get that because we didn't use a lot of home heating oil as much as furnace oil as we did in, say, the winter before. And of course, we're also looking at a more ominous sign. I'm not going to dwell too much on that, but it does suggest that there may be diesel may be a proxy for a decline in overall demand as far as economic health of North America is concerned. So we may be seeing the first signs, the very tipping point of what could be a beginning of a recession, certainly in North America. Either way, diesel still remains extraordinarily tight in terms of supply. The United States Department of Energy weekly petroleum report, read it there today, Scott. I know we do this here on SaltWire. Down 17% below the 5-year average. That's a pretty startling number given these low prices for diesel. Bottom line, take advantage of it while you can, but understand that behind this is a much more unfortunate potential for an economic slowdown.
That leads me into my next question, Dan, which is we're getting close now to the next long weekend in this country, the May 24th weekend, Victoria Day weekend, however you refer to it in your region. But it's a long weekend. It's kind of the unofficial kickoff of summer. So my question is, as we sit here now getting close to that May 24th long weekend, summer coming around the corner, where are you seeing prices trending into the summer? I know it's volatile and sometimes hard to nail down, but the data you're seeing now, where's it going?
I think inevitably energy markets and those who trade within it, not those really involved physically with the market, but those on the sidelines, are going to have to finally shake off their nervousness over the U.S. Fed, banking crisis, the U.S. debt ceiling. Those are important issues, but they have nothing to do with fundamentals. Fundamentals for gasoline from that same report, Energy Information Agency weekly petroleum report, suggests that gasoline inventories dropped over 3 million barrels week over week. It means that demand is up. Supply, of course, continues to be constrained. In the case of gasoline, about 6% below what is normal for this time of year. So this is going to correct, and you and I have talked about this in the past few weeks. When markets finally get their head out of the grass, of headlines and things that are irrelevant to oil and gas and energy fundamentals, we're going to see prices rise dramatically. You're right, May 2-4 weekend, Victoria Day long weekend across the country, but also the launch of the U.S. summer demand driving season. And with these lower prices for Memorial Day, it's likely to spark a massive increase in prices. I wouldn't be surprised that from May 2-4 or heading into that weekend, all the way to about the final weekend of June, as we head towards Canada Day, that we could see an average 20-cent increase in the price of gasoline. That's right, 20 cents. That's because the bad numbers can't hold forever, and they can't continue to ignore those very important fundamentals: tight supply, surging demand, especially with these artificially low prices.
I think it's important to touch on again, because you talk about fundamentals a lot and how important they are to where prices are heading or how they're set, et cetera. What's the biggest part of what you consider to be the fundamentals that's not being adhered to right now that's kind of causing this willy-nilly volatility?
We've seen markets since last August try to find alternative ways of describing what's happening out there. Of course, you have political actors, especially in the United States, not just blocking pipelines, talk about a slap in the face to every Canadian with the Keystone XL, but also at the same time going around groveling to Saudi Arabia, to Venezuela to produce more heavy oil that their friends in north of the border could produce. But when it comes down to the fundamentals of economics behind the supply picture, it's pretty clear that using strategic petroleum reserves they did in the United States to provide some kind of price stability backfired. Oil still remained above $70 a barrel, threatening to move to $80 a barrel. You have to replenish that. Some 200 million barrels isn't readily available in a market that's undersupplied by 2 to 3 million barrels a day. So we're talking about an inevitable crunch. And when that crunch takes place, the only way that crunch can be addressed is by higher prices. You don't like high prices? The best solution to higher prices are higher prices, because the market responds to the proper signals and says, with high prices, we'll produce more. With low prices, they're producing less. And the evidence is pretty clear. We have a real problem with how the markets are interpreting fundamentals. And it's for that reason that we could see some shock that we saw, for instance, last summer, although not as high, $2.15 a liter. I don't think we're going to see that. But do bank on, $1.80 to $1.85 here across much of Atlantic Canada. And that doesn't even include the impending increases, and they'll be dramatic in the case of Nova Scotia, of the federal government's imposition of its carbon tax.
Dan, you've been covering energy markets and fuel pricing and making predictions based on data for a really long time. What are some things that you're seeing right now, geopolitically or otherwise, that you're keeping a close eye on? I like to ask you this each week because each week it can be something different. But what are you watching right now that you feel could have a big impact on where prices and trends are heading?
Well, if we're not looking at a global recession, and we've been talking about it now for 8 or 9 months, if we are not going to have one of those things, it's going to be very mild and there isn't a big downturn, then I would expect prices to reflect that sooner or later, especially during the summer. The second half of 2023 is going to feature that tightness in supply of oil, and to a lesser extent, the other products like gasoline and diesel. And critical, the path towards that is very easily seen. And I turn SaltWire's viewers here to the EIA Weekly Petroleum Report. I mentioned it earlier. Look at that. Just read the one page. It's a one page that's done weekly, Wednesday, 10:30 a.m. unless there's a holiday. Read what it says on oil, on distillates and gasoline. And when you read that, you get a pretty good idea where prices are going to go. So it's not, yes, I spend a lot of time on these things. I've been doing it for quite some time, but I think the public needs to be informed just how important oil and gas really are to our way of life and to our economies. And in a country like Canada, transportation is very big. So is keeping your house warm and keeping our manufacturing going. To do that, we need energy, and the world's looking like it needs a lot more, not less. And so for that reason, my crystal ball says sooner or later, reality is going to come back to hit us hard.
And that's why we appreciate having you here with us each week on Prices at the Pumps and SaltWire, to be able to give our SaltWire audience some insight and some tools to be able to maybe even look into some of these things for themselves, just to see what's happening out there. But when you're not with us here on SaltWire, and I can't believe that you would ever do anything other than be with us here, Dan, but where else can people find you, interact with you, and just get more information?
AffordableEnergy.ca is the latest that I'm working on. It's usually dealing with policy on energy. You can also see my gas price predictions at Gas Price Wizard. And of course, from time to time, if you need to get a hold of me directly, president at AffordableEnergy.ca.
Dan, as always, we appreciate you being here. Enjoy the rest of your day. Have a great weekend, and can't wait to get back and see what else is happening when we do this again next week.
Looking forward to that, Scott. Let's all dry up. Here we go.
Indeed. Have a great one, Dan. Thank you.
Take care, Scott.